Gunfire echoed through Leinster Road in Old Swan, Liverpool, just after midnight on the 21st of August, 2022. Neighbours woke to the sound of 10 shots tearing through the quiet street. In the back garden of her own home, 28-year-old Ashley Dale lay fatally wounded. She had tried to run, escaping through the back door, but collapsed only yards away. Her phone was found on the ground where she fell, a silent witness to the violence that had just unfolded. Ashley, a council officer with no criminal ties, had been gunned down in a targeted attack meant for someone else. The intended target, her partner, Lee Harrison, was nowhere to be found. The killers had already vanished into the night, leaving behind only shell casings and devastation. This is the story of how a violent feud between Liverpool gangs claimed the life of an innocent woman who never chose that world. If you think stories like this could never touch an ordinary life, Ashley's case proves otherwise. Don't just watch and move on, hit subscribe now. And if you refuse, explain in the comments why you're fine staying in the dark. Ashley Dale was 28 years old. She grew up in Liverpool, close to her family, and was described in court by those who knew her as bubbly, outgoing, and fiercely loyal to her friends. She built a career as an environmental health officer for Knowsley Council, where colleagues remembered her as dedicated, professional, and ambitious. Outside work, Ashley loved travel, time with friends, and the company of her dachshund, Darla. She was the kind of person her parents said would light up a room, someone who worked hard and dreamed of building a life beyond the city she grew up in. But her private life placed her closer to danger than she could have ever imagined. Ashley was in a long-term relationship with Lee Harrison. Harrison was a former youth footballer, once considered talented enough to play semi-professionally. But in his 20s, he was drawn into Liverpool's drug scene. By the time of Ashley's death, prosecutors told the court, he was running a Class A drug line across Merseyside. Harrison had aligned himself with the Hillsiders, a group operating on the edges of organized crime in the city. The mismatch was stark. Ashley lived an ordinary, hard-working life. Harrison's choices tied him to a violent underworld. And slowly, those two worlds, one normal, one criminal, began to overlap in ways that would end in tragedy. By the time Ashley Dale was building her career, Lee Harrison was building something very different. Court records show Harrison was operating a Class A drug line across Merseyside, a criminal enterprise that gave him both money and status, but also placed him in the path of dangerous rivals. At the center of that rivalry was Niall Branch Barry. Once, Harrison and Barry had been close. But prosecutors told the court that their friendship collapsed after a consignment of drugs went missing. Barry believed Harrison had betrayed him, and from that moment, the two men stood on opposite sides. Harrison chose to align himself with the Hillsiders, a Liverpool crime group with their own territory and influence. Barry, meanwhile, began consolidating power of his own. He was younger, ambitious, and commanded loyalty from a tight-knit group of associates, men who would carry out his orders without hesitation. From a dispute over stolen drugs, a personal grudge was born. But on the streets of Liverpool, grudges rarely stay personal for long. Encrypted messages later recovered by investigators revealed Barry's anger boiling over. Threats were sent. Rumors spread. Each move Harrison made with the Hillsiders deepened the divide. And in the middle of it all was Ashley Dale. Living an ordinary life, yet tethered to someone whose choices had pulled him into a world of paranoia, violence, and revenge. A personal grudge had become a war. In June 2022, the simmering feud between Niall Branch Barry and Lee Harrison erupted in public. At the Glastonbury Festival, thousands of miles from Liverpool's streets, Harrison's friend Jordan Thompson confronted Barry's close associate, Josias. The assault left Zias humiliated, and it sent a message Barry could not ignore. From that point forward, the feud escalated. Prosecutors told the jury that Barry began sending threatening messages and voice notes directed at Harrison. Some were filled with rage, others with warnings of what was to come. In his own words, Barry vowed violence. Ashley Dale, though never involved in the feud, began to feel its weight. In voice notes to her friends, she spoke of living in constant fear. She described Barry's outbursts, his reputation for violence, and the paranoia that crept into her daily life. She was, as the court heard, constantly looking over her shoulder. For Ashley, this was not the life she had chosen, but it was the one she was now forced to live because of Harrison's ties. And while she tried to keep her routine, her work, her friends, her home, those watching her believed her house was already marked. By the summer of 2022, Niall Branch Barry was running more than a feud. He was running a network. At the center of his operations was a flat on Pilch Lane in Huyton. Police later described it as the gang's hub, an unremarkable address that became a command post for surveillance, encrypted communications, and planning. Inside that flat, roles were clear. Barry gave the orders. James Witham was his gunman, a man prosecutors said was prepared to carry out executions on his behalf. Joseph Pearce acted as driver and facilitator, the one who ensured Barry's plans could be put into action. Josias, the same man assaulted at Glastonbury, had become Barry's trusted planner, his right hand. And then there was Ian Fitzgibbon, who coordinated logistics, ensuring weapons, vehicles, and safe houses were always within reach. From the outside, their lives gave little away. Some stayed in expensive resorts abroad, others mixed in Liverpool's nightlife, appearing to be ordinary young men. But encrypted EncroChat messages painted the real picture. They spoke in codes, rehearsed movements, and even tested their weapons in preparation for the attack they were planning. One key detail later revealed in court was the stolen Hyundai i30N. It became their ghost car, used for surveillance runs around Ashley's street. Automatic number plate recognition cameras would later track its movements across Liverpool in the days before the shooting. Behind every move was paranoia. Prosecutors told the jury Barry believed he was being hunted too. In messages to his associates, he raged about betrayal, about enemies closing in, about the fear that Harrison's side would strike first. The cracks began to show. The feud was no longer a contained grudge, it had turned into a cycle of planning, counter-planning, and escalating threats. And in the middle of it, Ashley Dale's home had been placed under watch. They moved between normality and violence with ease, drinking in bars one evening, plotting a murder the next. But for Barry and his network, the line between the two worlds was blurring, and the paranoia that fueled them would soon drive them to act. August 20, 2022. The night before Ashley Dale was killed, the first sign of danger appeared right outside her home. Investigators told the court that Ashley's car tire had been deliberately slashed. Later, her house alarm was triggered without explanation. Both were warning signs, but Ashley brushed them off. To her, they seemed like nothing more than random mischief, annoying, unsettling, but not life-threatening. She could not know that her home was already under surveillance. At the same time, the stolen Hyundai i30N was back on Liverpool's roads. Behind the wheel was Joseph Pearce. Next to him sat James Witham, the gunman Barry had chosen. The pair were hunting for Lee Harrison. Their instructions were clear: find him, follow him, and finish what Barry had started. But Harrison was not where they expected him to be. He was moving separately that night, avoiding the very streets they searched. The killers circled, growing more frustrated with each pass. Court evidence later revealed that surveillance cameras caught the Hyundai making repeated journeys, a car with no purpose except to stalk. Inside the Pilch Lane flat, Barry was losing patience. The feud had dragged on, and his anger had hardened into obsession. It no longer mattered if Harrison was present. The decision was made. The attack would go ahead. In those final hours, Ashley lived her life as normal. She sent casual messages to friends, replied to Harrison, and took a last photograph with her dog, Darla. To her, it was just another Saturday night in Old Swan. But the clock was already ticking. Outside, two men were driving in the dark with a submachine gun on the seat between them. The order had been given. And Ashley had no way of knowing she had only minutes left to live. Imagine being Ashley, sending a text, unaware you've only got minutes left. Don't just watch from the sidelines. Subscribe now, because the next story could show how quickly everything changes. And if you won't subscribe, at least be honest in the comments about why you'd gamble with ignorance. August 21, 2022. Just after midnight. the Hyundai i30N pulled into Leinster Road. Inside, James Witham wore gloves and carried a Scorpion submachine gun. Joseph Pearce was at the wheel. Their target was Lee Harrison. But Harrison wasn't there. Instead, the house was quiet. Ashley was home, texting friends, her dog close by. Witham stepped out. He marched up to the front door and, with a single brutal kick, smashed it open. In seconds, he was inside. Then came the gunfire. 10 rounds ripped through the hallway and garden. Bullets tore into walls, doors, furniture. Ashley was hit in the abdomen. She stumbled into her garden, collapsed, and cried out for help. The killers fled, leaving silence behind them. Neighbors, startled awake by the shots. The crime scene told its own story. Ashley's phone lay where she dropped it, later revealing a string of voice notes she had sent to friends in the weeks before, warning that Barry's threats terrified her. Her words became prophecy. Forensics quickly began piecing together the attack. Ballistics confirmed the rounds came from a Scorpion, a Czech-made weapon smuggled into Britain for underworld use. On the kitchen floor, detectives found Witham's trainer footprint, one of the crucial links tying him to the scene. DNA traces added another thread, and CCTV cameras picked up the Hyundai on nearby roads. Automatic number plate recognition tracked its movements across the city that night. Every frame narrowed the circle. Piece by piece, a wall of evidence was rising. The killers thought they had escaped. They thought they had silenced the only witness. But they had left a forensic trail no one could outrun. The killers thought they were safe. But the walls of evidence were closing in. The shooting of Ashley Dale triggered one of Merseyside Police's largest investigations in recent years. Within weeks, the circle began to close. Detectives moved fast. Niall Branch Barry was traced to Formby Hall, a luxury golf resort, where officers arrested him with £10,000 in cash as he prepared to flee. James Witham and Joseph Pearce, who had gone to ground after the shooting, were tracked to Scotland, where armed officers moved in to take them into custody. Sean Zias, already under mounting pressure, eventually surrendered himself at a Liverpool police station. Ian Fitzgibbon tried to outrun justice by fleeing abroad, but he was extradited back to the UK after being located in Spain. And George Radford, accused of assisting the offenders, was also detained during the sweep of coordinated raids. In November 2023, the courtroom in Liverpool Crown Court heard the full story. The evidence was overwhelming. Ballistics, DNA, CCTV, encrypted messages, and Ashley's own warnings left little room for doubt. By 2025, the sentences were handed down. Niall Barry, the architect of the feud, was ordered to serve at least 47 years. James Witham, the gunman who kicked down Ashley's door and opened fire, was jailed for 43. Joseph Pearce, his driver and facilitator, received 41. And Sean Zias, whose loyalty to Barry fueled the violence, was sentenced to 42 years. 2 men walked free of Ashley's murder. Ian Fitzgibbon was acquitted of her killing, though he would later be jailed separately for a major drugs conspiracy. George Radford, too, was acquitted. And in a bitter twist, Lee Harrison, the man believed to have been the real target, was himself convicted later for running a county lines drug line. For Ashley's family, there was no justice that could undo what had been done. At her funeral, friends and relatives described her as vibrant, kind, and ambitious, a young woman who worked hard in public service, who loved her dog Darla, and who had her entire future stolen. Her mother told the court that her life had been destroyed forever by the choices of others. The case left its mark on Merseyside. It was proof that drug feuds did not stay contained to gangs or street corners. Innocent lives could, and did, pay the price. Ashley Dale's name became a reminder that beneath every statistic, every headline, is a family left in pieces, and a community forced to confront the cost of silence. Ashley Dale was not in the game. She was a daughter, a friend, a professional, a young woman with her life ahead of her. But she became the victim of a feud she never chose. For her family, no sentence could ever balance the loss. And for Merseyside, her death was a brutal reminder that drug wars don't just claim those inside them, They spill out, and they take the innocent too. What do you think of the sentences handed down? Were they enough? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've watched this far and still haven't subscribed, why? Is it because you think stories like this could never reach you? Is it because you believe you're safe from the chaos that took Ashley's life? Prove me wrong in the comments. For everyone else, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and be ready for the next case, because these stories don't end here.